Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to our LinkedIn Live on combating microaggressions through executive coaching. Welcome. It's really great to see you here. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit of time in your day to learn a little bit more about microaggressions and how coaching can help. We'll be using the chat throughout, so please do type in the chat, say hi, let us know where you are in the world and anything else you want to share. Perhaps you know one of our wonderful panelists. You might want to say hello to them personally, or even me. I'm always happy to hear from you. I want to say a big thank you. Those of you who registered through Eventbrite may have contributed to my social enterprise, Rocking Your Teens. Your donations go towards increasing resilience, inspiring and raising aspirations in teenagers. And if anyone wants to find out more about Rocking Your Teens, do go to our website, www.rockingyourteens.com. In fact, we have a Girls in STEM conference coming up in June. So it'd be great if you signed up to find out more about that. In case you don't know me, my name is Jenny Garrett. I'm an award-winning career coach, author, and leadership trainer. And together with my team, we aim to elevate diverse talent and foster inclusivity. My latest practical and empowering book is Equality versus Equity, Tackling Issues of Race in the Workplace. My lovely colleague Tanya probably will post a link to where you can purchase it from. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about microaggressions. In this webinar, you'll learn how to identify and interrupt microaggressions. Microaggressions are the subtle, often unintentional interactions that can create a hostile environment for minoritized employees. You'll discover how to use coaching to create lasting change, which means we aim to combat those microaggressions and remove them from your workplace. They are widespread, and research shows that 40% of people have experienced microaggressions at work. And nearly 60% of those from the LGBTQ plus community have been targeted. And for Black Caribbean staff, the figure is even higher at 64%. We're going to talk about how this impacts people and what you can do about it shortly. And in this session, Janice, Marie, Ngozi, Nita, and Martha, all listed in the Diverse Executive Coach Directory, a directory that connects corporate organizations with coaches from the global majority or ethnically diverse backgrounds, will discuss what it looks like to combat microaggressions through executive coaching. I believe my colleague Tanya will put a link to our website in the chat. And we also have a fantastic LinkedIn page actually for the Diverse Executive Coach Directory. So do look that up. We have our events on there. We spotlight our coaches there as well. So how this session is going to run is that Janice, Marie, Ngozi, Nita, and Martha will briefly introduce themselves. I'll start off by asking them a few questions, and then we'll open it up to you for your questions and reflections also. We'll be keeping an eye on the chat throughout, so don't feel you have to wait until the end to add a question or a comment or a thought. You can do it throughout. And we'll be using the hashtag combat microaggressions on. So please feel free if you want to share on LinkedIn or any other social media about this webinar, but please do use that hashtag combat microaggressions and feel free to link in with our coaches, including myself, during this session. Okay, so I'm going to start with you, Nita. Please could you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. As Jenny said, I'm Nita Sharma. I work as an executive coach and a supervisor, which I have been doing for a number of years. I've also been in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion for more years, I care to remember, over 20 years. And thinking about this program made me reflect on the very first time I came across, wasn't the term we used 20 years ago. we called it micro-inequities, which still is obviously, I think it was the forerunner to microaggression, which we designed, which I designed for Shell 20 years ago, looking at how small annoyances erode our positive feelings about work. So both as a consultant and a facilitator, as well as a coach, I'm passionate about how we can tackle this, not only individually, but also systemically.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to jump to Martha next.
Thank you, Jenny. Greetings, everyone. My name is Martha Cuffey, and I'm an executive coach. I also work deeply with the body and facilitate teams. I've spent sort of the last 20 plus years supporting change agents and leaders to embody more presence, influence, and joy. I mean, that often gets forgotten in these sort of things, so that they can really increase their impact. I do love working deeply with the body to shift deep stress patterns and clear what I call the debris on the racetrack, which can come from decades of working in high pressure environments, facing things like microaggressions, which we're talking about today, so they can be champions who are not in these permanent cycles of kind of burnout recovery. So I'm pleased to be here today.
Thank you so much, Martha. Great to have you here. We'll go to Ngozi.
Thanks, Jenny. Hello, my name is Ngozi Wella, and I am director and co-founder of Aurora, which is a culture change consultancy. And we specialize with working with organizations to enable good mental health and well-being in the workplace for all their employees. And that includes the marginalized. And we do so through coaching, through programs, training programs, strategy development, as well as what we call governance, which is things like metric stewardship and making sure that you're doing the right things continuously so that you can avoid having employees go through, as Martha described, that boom bust cycle of burnout recovery.
Thank you so much. Such important work that everyone's doing. Over to you, Janice.
Hello, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here. My name's Janice Taylor. I'm a career and leadership development coach, and I'm based down in Brighton by the Sea, which is a bit great at the moment. I work with both groups and individuals, helping people to move forward with their careers with renewed focus, energy, and resilience. So, yeah, this is this topic is of huge interest to me. So, thank you, Jenny. Thank you.
Lovely. Anne-Marie.
Hi, thank you, Jenny. Good afternoon, everyone. Lovely to see you here. I'm Marie Loney, an executive wellbeing coach with a background in creativity and business. So as most of you here, I had worked in various industries where I'd experienced sort of high pressured environments and overwhelming workloads, impossible deadlines. And then I decided enough was enough and started my business, founded Glow Consultancy London. So I support professional women and organisations to develop wellbeing practice for a better work-life balance. As I said before, I come from a creative background, so I use some of those techniques such as drawing and collaging to bring some fun into the practice. And being here today and discussing this topic is something that's very close to my heart, because when I work with my clients, I'm equipping them with tools to enhance their mental fitness and their productivity, their resilience as well, their stress management, and fostering a psychological safe sort of environment for their personal and professional development.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. It's really great to have you here. What a wealth of experience you all bring. It's really fantastic. And I want to just give a couple of shout outs to Jay, to Ellen, to Alison, who have said hello in the chat. So fantastic to have you here. And of course, all of the rest of the audience. So I'm going to get straight to the questions. The first one is, what are microaggressions that you've experienced personally or your clients have experienced? Do you have some specific examples? Because I think microaggressions are talked about a lot, but often people want to know, what does it actually look like? Am I committing them? Am I the one, who's a perpetrator? So I'm going to start with you, Marie. If you could give us an example, it'd be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. I can give them a couple of examples. So one experience I had personally was talking to a supplier, and speaking to them over the phone. I hadn't met them in person, and then when we did actually meet, they seemed a bit surprised and confused, and they were like, "You don't sound the way you look," and I said, "What do you mean? I don't sound the way I look? How should I sound?" And they kind of brushed it off. "Oh, you know what I mean." And I don't know what you mean. And for me, it kind of like hit home. It was very questioning. It was very, I don't know, it was a bit of an insult, really. And then it was like, really, what do they mean? And then I'm trying to think, are they meaning this in a positive way? Are they meaning it in a negative way? What exactly are they meaning around that? So that was, obviously they were embarrassed. And obviously the conversation kind of moved on. But that was a kind of micro insult. That was kind of, for me, it was like saying, I can't pronounce your name, so I'll call you Fred, or something like that. Another situation I remember with a client who was talking, we were talking about her manager and the projects that they were doing. And she expressed how exciting and innovating this project was. So she was speaking to her manager about that, and they could obviously feel this excitement. But they actually asked her to, they were overwhelmed by her excitement. And they actually asked her, to kind of like, calm down, you're being a bit aggressive. And for a person of color, it hit her like a brick, really, because she had a great relationship with this manager, and she was really kind of hurt by what they actually said. And she said, you're mistaking aggression for passion. And then it's kind of like, where do you come back from that? Because the conversation moved on. They were still holding the hurt. And that's really a challenge. So it's those kind of everyday sort of slights or insults or people of color experience. And that can be likened to death by 1,000 cuts. That's a term that's coined to encapsulate the increasing impact of microaggressions and systemic racism. And the challenge is that people of color experience this on a daily basis, multiple times on a daily basis. And to actually hold that and deal with that, it's a problem. And just one last thing, my best one is, I like you, but you're not like other Black people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing those really clear examples. We've got Paola sort of with a real, oh my goodness, can't believe that someone said that. She's put that emoji out there. And Pranay Raj, apologies if I pronounced your name incorrectly, just finding this session really useful. So thank you so much for bringing it to life. Nita, what would you add?
Well, interesting enough, Jenny, I did some research about a couple of years ago globally for a client of mine, looking at how does microaggression show up in India, in parts of Africa and the US. And I downloaded it today, and there's about 50 examples that sort of emerged from, oh, Africa is so simple, what's the big thing, to when a good job has been done. This is from a colleague and from one of the hubs in Africa. I hear my white colleague saying, "You didn't tell me you could do this," to "You really speak good English," as Marie has sort of pointed out. I was coaching a young Asian woman in an organization, and she sort of shared with me that her co-worker said to her, "Oh, your parents must be disappointed in you because you're not married," basically. Other examples that I can go on, so not being invited to lunch, being not included on an email circular, and being told, "Oh, you really fit in, don't you? You fitted into this team seamlessly," And for me, I guess I've heard things like, well, I've heard them both from India and from the UK. "Oh, you don't sound Indian." Because when they hear me on the phone, and then they see me, they go, oh my God. So again, that's a kind of microaggression that I think can happen unthinkingly. It does happen. And I just also want to say it's, I think microaggression, as you pointed out, Jenny, it happens to women, LGBT community, transgender. So there's a whole area. And the last thing I want to say is that we can also be perpetrators of microaggression ourselves. And that's something that I know that we will be touching on, that we all have unconscious biases that lead us to microaggressions.
Thank you. Gosh, the plethora of examples that are coming out shows how widespread this really is. And yeah, they seem to be resonating with those in the audience. Thanks for your comments, Martin, about, of course, absolutely people with disabilities experiencing them, and Melanie, for your empathy. I'm going to go to you next, Ngozi.
Thank you. Microaggressions. I think that the examples that have been given already about people see, particularly my given name, my christened name, which was, I had a much more difficult, challenging surname, even for people who are Nigerian. It was Ngozi Onyekruje. And they look at that and make an assumption about who I would be. And then would meet this very well-spoken person, and the number of times I'd be greeted with, "Oh, your English is very good," is untold. But I think the key thing is about microaggressions is often the person committing the microaggression isn't aware of the fact that they're saying anything to be considered offensive. So when you do, and that's not to say that it's not offensive or that you shouldn't feel affronted, but it's to say that when you then confront them, if you do confront them, that you're often almost gaslit and dismissed. Oh, I didn't mean any offense by it. Oh, you're being so sensitive. I recall a lot of times people would use that, you're very aggressive descriptor for me. Which actually is their conflation of assertiveness with aggression, because I happen to be a Black woman. It's very demoralizing and damaging, because as you said, Marie, it's that death by 1,000 cuts. The result is to change your behavior, whether they did that intentionally or not. That's the impact. So that's why I think it's something that's so important to be discussed and to recognize when you're committing it yourself, and also when you're on the receiving end of it, and to do something about that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Janice, what would you add?
Just a couple of not small examples. I can think of one quite recently when I was persistently questioned where I was from. And when I asserted that I'm a Black woman with a Caribbean heritage, it was then inferred that I wasn't Black enough or dark enough to call myself a Black woman. So that, that's just, and that wasn't necessarily, that was in a sort of hospital situation that happened. And I'm sure the person, perhaps that was their way of trying to make conversation, but yeah, it clearly didn't work for me. Other examples of people I've talked to is reports being sent back and forth with red ink corrections, comments being made about their hair. So those are just some of the examples. And again, as other people have said, if you're constantly having this day in, day out, not just once, twice, unthinking, perhaps, and mostly unintentional, but it still does the damage, really. That's the point I would make. It's unintentional, perhaps, but it still does the damage.
Thank you. And we're going to come to you next, Martha. Paula, we will come to your question, but we'll come to it later. So we're going to stick with this question for the moment. So Martha, if you could share your example.
Yeah, I was with a work colleague. We were about to board a flight. My colleague gets sent to the non-priority queue, and she's got a high-grade ticket. So there was an assumption that she wasn't going into the priority queue, and that nor was I. And the colleague of the staff pulled up the other one when she actually checked the ticket and saw that she actually needed to go in the other queue. I was in Harvey Nichols actually a few months ago, and then a woman came up to me and she said, "Where's the toilet?" And I just looked at her and said, "I don't know."
Mm, mm, mm. Yes. Again, assumptions. Yeah. Assumptions. Are you the staff? You must be a staff member. You can't be a shopper. You must be an economy flyer. You couldn't be a first class flyer or business class flyer person flying. Absolutely. You want to add something, Ngozi?
Yeah, I was just going to say, a lot of the time we assume that microaggressions can only be things that people have said to us, but there are different kinds of microaggressions. There's the verbal, the things that we've described, but there's also the behavioural. So the assumptions that you're part of the cleaning crew, or that you don't belong here and must be lost, because you can't possibly be part of this organisation at this level. That is also a microaggression. But then there's the environmental microaggressions, so things that prevent people from being included, not having accessibility for people who have mobility issues, that kind of thing. So it's just being conscious of everything that you're doing that is systematically othering someone, whether intentional or not.
Absolutely. And just to add a couple of examples, building on your point, Ngozi, that it's sort of someone mentioned before, when someone spoke with an accent but perfectly great English, people squinting as if, oh, I've got to squint to understand what you're saying. Or when someone speaks, suddenly you're leaning back to show, yeah, this person's not going to have much to say. I'll lean back. I won't show my interest. Or the double takes. Oh, this person, should they be in this meeting? Are you sure you're in the right room? Because I wouldn't expect to see you in this room. And in the US, they talk about the John Wall. I don't know if you're familiar with it. You know, often you walk into an organization and there's a load of pictures of, able-bodied white men of a certain age. And you see all of those images of the people who've had the role before you, and you think, well, there's no chance I could do that. And inadvertently, you're giving a very strong message about who succeeds here. So completely agree with your point that there are many types of microaggressions, and it's good for us to consider that.
Can I just add one more? Oh,
please do.
I was just there's something also about the tone when you that people can use when they're responding to something you said. So I can think, was telling someone I'm a career and leadership development coach, and I go, oh. And so it's also, I think there's a lot in how people respond as well as what they're saying.
Yeah, great point. So I want to move on to another question, and please note, everyone in the chat, I am noting your questions and I will be coming to them. But I want to ask first, why does tackling microaggressions matter in the workplace? And what is their tangible impact? We've talked about the fact that they're, not a very nice experience, but, in some ways you might say, so what? There's lots of not very nice experiences in the workplace. So actually, why, what's the tangible difference? Why do they matter? And I'm going to start with Martha.
Oh, thank you, Jenny. I was just reflecting on that. One thing is loss of voice, actually. Something that matters to you and you're not voicing it. And so if you don't voice it, it's like a spiral that can go down. You start to withdraw. There's a lack of dignity because you don't feel seen. And then, of course, if you're not speaking up, then people think you're quiet or you don't have anything to say. And so they start to make it an assessment about your performance at work. So there's a real connection between you as a person being shut down and then what it means later on down the line. And then, and your reputation, gets infused with this, with you as a shut down, maybe stressed, traumatized person. And we're not tackling the issue. So you get labeled. And then that sticks with you. And it takes so long to peel that back once it starts happening. And then you're more likely to be alone and not ask for help.
And interestingly, you probably get the feedback, why aren't you confident? Why don't you speak up? Without thinking about the cycle that has created this issue in the first place. Yeah, such a good point. Thank you so much, Martha. I will go to Ngozi next.
There's so much talk recently about the importance of creating psychological safety in the workplace, but you have to do the work to do that. And when you have a really clear, inclusive workplace policy, and statement that is being consistently and persistently undermined by people's lack of thought, carelessness, or even their inherent conscious racism, biases, sexism, whatever, coming out in these subtle ways, whether they be verbal or behavioral, then it fails to create the psychological safety that we've already recognized is necessary for your people to do their best work. And that's what this is about, actually. Everybody wants to come to the workplace, do their best, and be rewarded fairly, respected for their work that they're doing. But if you have a workplace that does not tackle the supposedly minor instances of careless talk or carelessness, then how are all of your employees, particularly your marginalized employees, supposed to feel safe and comfortable at work? So when they get told, oh, it's okay for you not to be okay, feel free to come and see me anytime, they can't. They don't have the trust that they are as regarded as others, because they've been made to feel less than.
Absolutely. Thank you. Very powerful point. Thank you. Janice, what do you think?
I guess I imagine sort of water dripping on a stone, actually. I like a metaphor. And that perhaps over time, you know, if this is something you're facing every day, day in, day out, it erodes at you, and it kind of wear you down, actually. So perhaps, you know, there will be a drop in your self-esteem, perhaps in your self-confidence. And as Martha was saying, you then start to withdraw, maybe, and then you become that, why aren't you being more confident? Why aren't you speaking up? So if you don't feel safe, you are perhaps more likely to withdraw from, perhaps you might be the quiet one in the meeting, or withdraw from certain opportunities. So it will eventually probably hurt your career and your ability to move forward, actually. When people feel under threat, they're more likely to withdraw. So I think that's one of the big things with microaggressions.
Yeah, and you know, we think it's increasingly competitive. There's this war on talent. We want to retain people. We need to be productive. So it's something that's eroding that, isn't it? Really? Yeah. Great point. Thank you, Marie. What would you add?
So I was just going to take up the point that's resonating for us all around this whole psychological safe space. Because if people don't feel valued or respected, and they can't contribute, then you're creating a toxic environment. You're creating some sort of toxic culture. So research has also demonstrated that diverse teams, they perform higher than homogenous teams. And that's really important. And I think for us, we're all responsible. We're all responsible for the environment that we work in and creating that environment. So it's our responsibility to call out microaggressions and support others, and also realize what's going on in ourselves regarding microaggressions too. And it's really important, I think, that, you know, we all work together, and we all kind of like speak up, share our ideas when it comes to microaggressions and what's going on. Because if someone doesn't actually say to you that I felt hurt by what you said, do you realize how that impacted on me? Then they're not going to, that awareness is not there. And what key to that is, if we're creating a culture whereby it's toxic, that may transfer onto our customers, because they're going to feel a sense of something's not quite right in this organization. So it's all.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Thinking about your end user, your customer, your client, how does this all impact them as well? Sometimes we're only thinking internally, but it absolutely does extend beyond. Anita, what would you add?
I guess I want to sort of build on what everybody has sort of said, and I think it might be helpful just to give a definition also around what psychological safety is and belonging is. And I love the work around Amy Edmondson, who talks about a belief that no one will be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, and mistakes, and the team is safe for interpersonal risk taking. That's one of the definitions. There are other definitions that Tim Clark talks about, who also does work around psychological safety. But it's what I think Marie and others have sort of said around why is it important of tackling it? Because it has to be, it can happen at the systemic level, it can happen at the team level, and it can certainly happen at the individual level. And irrespective of whatever level it's happening, it creates a sense of not belonging. It creates a sense around, I suppose, self-silencing, self-censoring ourselves. And I've coached, I was thinking about it this morning, and I remember coaching somebody, a mid-level manager in the NHS, and her response was to tackling this microaggression she was experiencing from her peers and her senior leaders was to go off sick, stress level, sense of not having well-being, not being supported, that in the end, she felt that the only choice she had at the time was to leave the organization because it was just kind of doing her head in. So when you have a sense around that the organization is not supporting you and there isn't an exit, there is nothing you can do, individuals, do take it upon themselves and actually think about leaving the organization. And I've done that myself. I thought, this isn't a sense of belonging for me here in this organization, so I need to have an exit strategy, which is what I've done, at least on one occasion, with one of the organizations.
Thank you so much. And the truth is that no organization wants their staff to feel like this. So they really do need to educate themselves so they can be more aware of what is happening and what is going on. Thank you so much. And thank you for the comments in the chat. Really, really helpful. People sharing their own experience, their own thoughts, their own reflections on what is being said as well. So I'm going to ask this final question before we go to questions from those who are in the audience. So what type of coaching interventions can help interrupt microaggressions? And I'm talking about coaching interventions for the perpetrator, the one who commits the microaggression, but also maybe for the person who's on the receiving end. As a coach, how can you help is what I'm really curious to understand here. I'm going to start with you, Ngozi.
Well, there's coaching and there's training. So for an organization, I think it's important that they are engaging in anti-racism training, in cultural sensitivity training, in the general training that will help individual employees to become more emotionally intelligent. Then as the individual perpetrator who wants to improve how they communicate, to not cause harm, then it's teaching them how to be open-minded, because typically when we get called out for these things, our response is to be defensive and to then be dismissive, which is so hurtful. When you've caused hurt, you're heaping hurt again by claiming that you're actually the victim of being judged rather than the other way around. So it's how to encourage people to accept criticism, take the learning on board, and try to do better. How to ask questions of people who are different from us, whatever the points of differences are, with an open heart and an open mind, so that we can improve our understanding and awareness. Then I also think it's important that we teach people who walk around in skins like ours, people who are more likely to be suffering from these microaggressions, whether because of race or gender or whatever, how not to internalize the things that are being said to them. I think that was the one thing I wish I could have done differently for myself, is the paper cuts really did damage my confidence and my self-esteem when it didn't need to, because it had nothing to do with me. So I like to teach my clients in using an analogy. I want you to be Teflon coated to recognize that you can have these insults, these microaggressions, these slurs, these slights imposed on you, but you don't have to accept them. At the end of the day, you take the Teflon coat off and it doesn't penetrate you because it's not about you. It always reminds me of that little adage when we were kids. I don't know if you remember, sticks and stones. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Names do hurt, but they don't have to.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully that is empowering for some people who might be experiencing microaggressions today. Marie.
Yes. I suppose it's about communication. Communication is key. So helping everyone in an organization to communicate better. So just as we've been mentioning around psychological safety, maybe some of those programs to draw people together, to have a better understanding, to learn from each other, to learn to respect each other. And then taking that a bit further and having those uncomfortable conversations so people can actually say, these are the kind of slurs, these are the kind of microaggressions that have been happening to me in this workplace. And I'd like to find a way through it. Can somebody help me? Because what we're doing is we're encouraging people to reflect on their experiences, and also maybe the perpetrator on any experience that they might have had or felt being marginalized or misunderstood, so that they can maybe be empathetic in this space, that they can have some compassion in this space, have a kind of a deeper sense of all of that, so that they can work together and support each other. It's really interesting for, other strategies, maybe strategies around stress management techniques, self-care. Ngozi was talking about these cuts, these paper cuts. How do we look after ourselves? How do we process this? Sometimes we can put up those boundaries. We can, have some sort of walls up that can protect us, but sometimes they do penetrate. Sometimes they, blindside us, and we have to find techniques or use techniques around, mental fitness, kind of thinking of positive mindsets and what we can do around that, rather than doting on the negative thoughts that have come to us from any comments that we've had.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much, Marie. Martha.
Hi, I'll go to a slightly different area. Two things that came up for me was about how do you design alliances as a way of being with your team and your colleagues, so that if you do end up, there being a situation with a microaggression, that you've already agreed how to tackle it, so that you're not going from this rough start from zero to right into conflict. Another thing I would say is people often are unaware of the impact of the microaggressions on them. They've probably been happening for decades. So I've got a little glass of water here with some murky water. And so people are often unaware of how much they've got in their, what I call their stress bucket. So how do you lower that? So I work with people with body practices to lower the level of charge that's already in the body, because the higher the charge, the less space we have to respond in a grounded, kind of holistic way. And that's the problem. And so then we just are reactive. Both the person who said it or done it and the person receiving it, they can both be really activated. A lot of workplaces right now are so full of tension. So unless both of them know where's my stress bucket level right now, then it's harder to be in a compassionate conversation.
Great point. And building this well-being aspect of it all, really working into the work that Ngozi was talking about as well. Janice, what would you add to this?
Just a little bit more, really. I was just thinking about what Martha was saying there and what others have said. I think in the moment, if you're receiving that microaggression, it's perhaps to remember to breathe and take a beat, actually, and perhaps think to yourself, is this something I feel safe enough or I need to tackle right now? Or is it something I can have a conversation with that person a bit further down the line? Or is there someone else an ally that I could talk through with this? And it might be a coach, it might be a trusted colleague, it might be a trusted friend. Who could I sort of use as a sounding board about this particular situation? But I think the biggest thing is just to, if you can, try and Teflon coat yourself, as Ngozi was saying, but to breathe and just give yourself a beat and give yourself the grace to just say, okay, I don't have to respond to this now, or if I choose to, how might I do it? And maybe from the perpetrator's point of view, if someone approaches you and to sort of call out or call you in actually about this, see it as a gift. Actually, if someone feels that the relationship you have is perhaps worthy enough for them to share with you honestly, how this is how it made me feel, what I experienced was, what made you say that in that way, then I think there's a lot of learning to be had there. And yeah, see it as a gift, a piece of really helpful feedback that you can grow from.
I think that's such a golden nugget for people to really hold on to. You don't have to be defensive or negative about this. Someone cares enough about you to give you that feedback because they would like you to be better and they want to have a good relationship with you. Absolutely, it's a gift. So thank you so much. Anita.
Well, I think a lot of things have been said, but a couple of things that occur to me is whether it's the perpetrator or whether it's the individual who's who's on the receiving end, is there's an education and a learning piece for different from different places. And I guess for the individual who may be experiencing microaggression is to tap into their own resilience and empowerment, and to come up with strategies that they can have in respect to managing the conversation with the perpetrator, in terms of approaching them and sort of saying, when you do this, this is what my experience is. And that can sometimes stop somebody in their track and saying, oh my God, I did not know I was doing this, basically. And in terms of the perpetrator, I guess it depends around what's in the system. And as I often say, sometimes people are well-intended, however, they can have a negative impact. So it is the educational piece that comes into it. And I think it's about, in the past, I've done coaching of people, not on microaggression, but on harassment. I've coached individuals donkey years ago who've obviously been perpetrators of harassment. And coaching has really helped to see the different perspective and the impact that has had on not only the person on the receiving end of it, but also the toxicity it creates in their workplace environment. So my approach would be asking good questions of both of them. And there's a real sort of, as I said, learning and an educational piece that's required for different reasons, in whether it's the individual or the perpetrator.
Great points, great points, and hopefully really helpful for those who are in our audience today. As I was listening to you, I was also thinking, what do we bring as coaches? I think we bring curiosity. And I think that really helps. Why might the person have reacted negatively to the comment you made? You're actually just holding up that mirror to the person, but also engaging in a curious way, not a naming, shaming, and blaming way, can really mean that we go into this conversation quite differently. And I think that we can really help people navigate through. The working world is complex. There are multiple levels. We're talking about microaggressions. It's maybe easier to challenge a microaggression to someone who's a peer or less senior than it is to someone more senior. So navigating the political landscape, the power dynamics that exist in your organization, and thinking about what's right for you. Because I think it's a different approach for different people in different contexts. And I think that coaching gives you that personalized conversation and opportunity to really think through your way forward. So absolutely agree with all of your points, and I totally agree with the point that is it starts with educating yourself. That is so important. So we've got a couple of questions. The first one from Paula, who says, what does one respond to those comments, I wonder? Could the panel suggest? She talked about specifically an example where someone came to her home and said, oh, I'm surprised how clean your home is. It's not specifically a work context, but it's a surprise. Why would someone be surprised that your home is clean? Why would someone be surprised that you look in the way that you do, or that you're educated in the place that you are, or that you travel business class? How do you respond when someone is surprised? Any ideas? Ngozi, immediately hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, because I always like to put how can I phrase this? I like to put the person who is saying something that is seemingly innocent but belies something more sinister. I'd like to get them to expose themselves. So I would just reply innocently with, why? I'm surprised that your house is so neat and tight. Why are you surprised? And then they would respond with something, and I'd keep asking the why until it exposes whatever it is that belies it. They will then often be horrified at their own ignorant belief that underlines that seemingly innocent throwaway comment. And you haven't had to get down and dirty or aggressive or anything. You've just asked them why.
Love it. Nita wants to add.
I guess the word that you used, Jenny, was really important for me in terms of when someone says it's curiosity. And I think if someone had said that to me, the place that I would come from, oh, that's interesting. Tell me what makes you say that. So for me, it's around, exploring their maybe thinking around what makes them say that, rather than, because my belief is that people, generally I believe people are well-intended, unless, I find underneath that there's something else going on. So curiosity is really key for me around that, and to explore maybe their unthinking comment that they've come up with.
Absolutely. Anyone else want to add to that, or shall I move? Oh, yes, Marie.
Yeah, I was just going to add that it's totally agree with Ngozi and Nita regarding the responses and the thought process that you would go through. But I also think that there might be a space for just sitting with those questions as well. So when that question has been asked of yourself, because sometimes that may trigger something in you and you want to respond in a certain way, and it's almost letting it settle just for a minute or a second or a couple of seconds, just to compose yourself, and then asking that why, and then giving that time for them to actually really think about why are you asking me why? Oh, you're maybe asking me why because, so that there's just time for it to settle.
Is there a sense that if you don't, it sounds a bit defensive? Is that the concern that you're thinking about?
Yeah, because sometimes for me, it would totally trigger me. And I've been in situations where something totally triggers me, and I have to kind of have that space first and just really process, and then start to ask, why did you say that? What your thoughts around that? Why did you think that? Why would you think that?
Yeah,
and my tone and my body language, just to connect everything together, to come back to the person with
we'll come to you shortly, Martha. Sorry, carry on.
Just to come, in a space where you can engage in the learning for that person, so that they become aware, rather than the whole, your whole body just goes stiff, your voice starts to, get on the defensive and go for it.
Thank you. Martha, what would you like to add?
Yeah, it's something about sometimes you just reflect back. It's like, oh, I'm surprised you asked. I'm surprised you said that, because you would be surprised as that they're surprised. So you're just mirroring, and then you just let it evolve, like you know.
Mm, mm,
And that sort of brings in the genuine, because often it's a shock,
yes.
and what we are in danger of is putting more importance on their feelings than your own. So you're
Yeah.
not being defensive by just saying what you're feeling. So, oh, I'm surprised you asked. And then there's the space that Marie spoke to allow those two things to kind of percolate.
Yeah. And for all we know, it might be just that that person's really messy and thought that you'd be messy like them. We don't know where it all comes from, do we? Sometimes, but it's really interesting to think about this. I often think, what we've said a lot is about the intention and impact. These are usually unintended. And a way to also go is, oh, I know you didn't intend to offend when you said I'm surprisingly clean, but actually, that's one of the things I really pride myself on. So I'd be happy if you just said, love how neat and tidy your home is, as opposed to I'm surprised about it. So sometimes we have to separate the intention so that we're not making the person, I hear what you're saying, we don't want to make the person feel like their feelings are more important than ours. But I think often people it's unintentional what they're saying. So it's useful then to separate the intention from impact as well. Yeah, great points, everyone. So we've got a second question here, and we've also got lots of great suggestions in the chat as well. So please do pick up on those great suggestions that others have put in the chat. So calling out microaggressions can be incredibly daunting. Do you consider it important to create allies to assist? Whoever wants to put their hand up to speak to that. I'll go to Nita first, then I'll go to you and Ngozi.
I think it's absolutely important that we create allies to assist. And my caveat would be that we don't go to allies who we can use it as a space to moan and groan. So it's about having allies who can be supportive of us, not just in terms of agreeing with us. And I was thinking again about this question. In many organizations I work with, they have ERGs, and sometimes using employee resource groups to form allies. Their allies in those groups is very, very important. I think without support, both externally and internally, we can actually internalize the microaggression, because I suspect it's probably not the first time that it's happening. So allies is absolutely important, as long as they are not kind of going, oh, isn't it poor you, or horrible organization. I think one that is empowering, not one that is sort of a reductionist, really.
Lovely. Thank you. Ngozi.
Yeah, this question of allies or rather how difficult or daunting it can be to confront someone who has abused you in some way. It really depends on how safe you feel, that psychological safety element again. So having allies who can not just give you confidence in numbers, but who can be there to corroborate that the offence actually took place. As we said before, the response often from people who have committed these microaggressions is to defend or deny or dismiss or downplay. So it is important to have someone who can be there to say, well, no, actually, I heard what you said, or I saw what you did, and it was offensive to me also. So that it's not just poor little old me always feeling victimized, complaining that the world is doing them an injustice. That certainly helps. And also I think it helps in building up evidence of a pattern of behavior. Anybody, any one of us can be guilty of committing a microaggression or offending or causing harm once or twice. It's when it's a trend or a repeated pattern of worrying behavior that actually this needs to be taken very, very seriously. And that's where it would really help to have allies who can support you, corroborate your story, your side of events, come up with examples that they have witnessed of this person causing this offence, to demonstrate that this is behaviour that needs to be taken very, very seriously at a human resource level. So yeah, I think allies are important for everything, but in this, that's where they really come into their own.
Lovely. Yes, Janice.
I was just going to say, yes, is my short answer. I think allies can be incredibly important in this, but I also think you could create, have your own, create yourself as an ally. If you want to. Sometimes I think it's helpful to write these things out. Actually, I'm a great fan of journaling, and if something has happened and you need some time and perspective to kind of look back at it, I think it can help to just write it out on a page, actually, and that will give you an opportunity to step back and kind of think, okay, what did I think about this? And who might I want to perhaps discuss this with, actually? So I think you can kind of use yourself as an ally. This is what I'm kind of saying as well. And I do think it's important sometimes. There may be times where you do need to vent and just get it out your system, actually. And obviously, you don't want to stay in that place, but sometimes you just need to find a way of releasing that energy and that toxicity, because you don't really want to internalize that, because a couple of people have mentioned that before.
Yeah, thank you so much. I definitely think that what happens so often is that we have to fight our own battles. We have to speak up for ourselves, and have those curious conversations, or ask why, or ask what the person meant by that. And it would be amazing if someone else was willing to step in and ask that question. Someone who doesn't have a vested interest. Just to let you know, Nita, there's quite a lot of noise from your papers.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Yeah, someone who doesn't have a vested interest. Me, if I experience a sexist microaggression, if a man speaks up and says, I don't think it's okay that you say to Jenny she doesn't need a pay rise because she's got a husband at home, that holds more weight than me saying it. If I'm an able-bodied person speaking up on a microaggression with someone who has a disability, it kind of holds more weight, because actually I don't have a vested interest. I'm just telling you it's not okay. And I think allies have a really great role to play in that. Now, goodness, our time has gone already. It went really, really quickly today. I did have one more question, which is, what's a coaching question that you would offer to someone working on either personally dealing with microaggressions or organizationally dealing to tackle them? I'm going to ask you to hold that thought for a moment. And before we answer that, I just want to say to everyone, thank you for coming today. Thank you to Janice, Marie, and Ngozi, Nita, and Martha, who you'll find in the Diverse Executive Coach Directory. As I've said, it's a directory that connects corporate organizations with coaches from the global majority, those who have ethnically diverse backgrounds. So do connect with them. Do join our page, the Diverse Executive Coach Directory page. Do find out more about my work by either connecting in with me or going to jennygarrett.global website, or looking at my book, Equality versus Equity. Our next event will be on the 23rd of May, and it's about creating an anti-racist culture. So it's a really interesting one and builds on some of the things we've said today, and maybe will help with the question around policies and procedures that was mentioned in the chat as well. And we always like to ask what you thought of our event. So we do have a short survey that we'd love you to complete. So in our last 2 minutes, I'd love it if our coaches today could answer that question. What's a coaching question that you would offer for someone working either personally dealing with microaggressions or organizationally trying to tackle them? I'll start with you, Marie.
So I'd probably talk to the individual, and I'd ask what are some of the strengths or the coping strategies that you can draw upon to navigate microaggressions whilst maintaining your well-being.
Wonderful. Janice, what's your question?
Back to the allies. Who are the people who could perhaps sort of support me in this, actually? That would be it. Who are my allies, potentially?
Great question. Martha?
Yeah, your next one-to-one, what's your ask of your boss? You know, be explicit about the impact it's having on you and what you need to thrive.
Lovely. Nita.
What would you like to be different for you in this experience?
Love it.
And what
And
strategies you have?
Sorry to interrupt you there. Lovely. And Ngozi.
Oh,
you're breaking up at my end anyway. Ngozi, we'll have to maybe ask you to type that question in the chat. Oh, you can try again. I think you're back.
hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Did you hear the question?
Yes. Okay, so I'd ask I'd ask the perpetrator.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're not going to catch that. I think you'll need to put it in the chat because it's stopping and starting. So I just want to say thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you to our coaches. You are all absolutely amazing. And we look forward to seeing you hopefully on the 23rd of May for our next event. Take care, everyone. And thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.